I never thought my life would end on a yacht, under the blazing sun, with the sound of champagne glasses clinking and laughter echoing around me. But that's how betrayal works. It never comes from your enemies. It comes from the people you let sit closest to you. "Are you comfortable, Dad?" my son Michael asked, leaning against the railing. He had that smile plastered on his face, the same one he used when he wanted something from me. I nodded. "I've been better," I muttered, shifting in my chair. My knees had started aching in the past few years, and while the yacht trip was supposed to be a celebration, I could sense something off. Emily, my daughter-in-law, glided toward me in her flowing white dress, her sunglasses perched perfectly on her nose. She bent down, her lips dangerously close to my ear, and whispered words that sent a chill down my spine. "Goodbye, old man." Before I could react, I felt her hands shove hard against my chest. The world tilted, the railing disappeared beneath me, and the ocean swallowed me whole. The shock of the cold water hit me like 1,000 knives. My lungs screamed as I kicked, struggling to break the surface. When I finally managed to gasp for air, I looked up at the deck and saw my son, standing there, smiling, not moving, not helping, just watching. Emily slipped her arm around him, her lips curling into a satisfied grin. Together, they raised their champagne glasses as though toasting to my death. I wanted to scream, to curse them, to tell them they'd regret this. But the waves pulled me under again. My limbs grew heavy, my chest burned, and for a fleeting second, I thought maybe this was it. Maybe I was going to die. But here's the thing about me. I didn't build a $3 billion empire by giving up. And I sure as hell wasn't going to let my own son bury me at sea. The current dragged me farther from the yacht, but instinct took over. I kicked harder, forcing myself up until I could suck in another desperate breath. My vision blurred, my body ached. But I remembered something Michael and Emily didn't know. This wasn't my first time being betrayed, and I had prepared for it. When I finally made it to shore, exhausted and trembling, I collapsed on the wet sand. Every muscle screamed, but my mind was sharper than ever. My son wanted my money. My daughter-in-law wanted my legacy. But what they didn't realize was that I'd already set things in motion. The game had just begun. Back on the yacht, I could imagine them laughing, celebrating, thinking they'd gotten away with it. But when they returned home that evening, still drunk on their own greed, they found me sitting in the living room, dry clothes on, a glass of whiskey in hand. Their faces turned pale, and beside me, resting on the table, was the special gift I had promised them long ago. You'd think that after nearly 8 decades of living, I'd know how to read people. But when it came to family, I let my guard down. My name is Richard Caldwell. Most people in New York's business circles know me as Caldwell the Kingmaker. I built my empire from scratch, a shipping company that started with a single rusty cargo vessel in the 1960s. By the time I was 50, I was moving half the goods that touched the East Coast. By 70, I had expanded into tech, real estate, and renewable energy. Now, at 82, my net worth hovered at a modest $3 billion, enough to make me a walking target. But here's the thing. I never cared much about the number. Money, to me, was a tool, a weapon, a shield, a bridge. What I cared about was legacy. I wanted my son, Michael, to carry it forward. Michael, my only child. When he was young, I spoiled him, not with toys, but with opportunity. The best schools, tutors, and internships. I thought I was giving him a head start. What I didn't realize was that I was planting the seeds of entitlement. Michael grew into a man who believed he deserved everything. Not because he earned it, but because his last name was Caldwell. And then, of course, there was Emily. She came into Michael's life like a storm. Charming, sophisticated, with a smile sharp enough to cut glass. At first, I liked her. She was clever, ambitious, and she made my son happy. But I learned quickly that her ambition didn't stop at Michael's hand. It extended straight into my bank accounts. The first red flag came 5 years ago. I remember Emily leaning across the dinner table, her voice dripping with faux sweetness. "Dad," she said, "don't you think it's time to think about estate planning? You know, before things happen." I chuckled back then, brushing it off. "Emily, I'm not dead yet." But she pushed. "Of course, but wouldn't it be smart to transfer assets early? Avoid taxes, secure Michael's future?" Michael sat beside her, nodding like a puppy. That was when I saw it, the way she controlled him with a glance, the way he deferred to her. I should have acted then. But like a fool, I convinced myself it was just concern, that she cared about the family's future. Another memory haunts me now. My 79th birthday. We were all on this very same yacht. I caught Emily standing at the bow, whispering to Michael when they thought I wasn't listening. "If he doesn't update his will soon," she said, "we'll be stuck waiting another 10 years. Michael laughed. "Don't worry, I'll handle him." I pretended I hadn't heard, but it gnawed at me, and that's when I decided to make my first move. You see, I may be old, but I'm not stupid. I started transferring pieces of my empire, not to Michael, not to Emily, but to a charitable trust, foundations, and to Grace, my granddaughter. Grace was my son's daughter from his first marriage. Sweet girl, only 20 now, and the only family member who ever visited me just to spend time. No hidden agendas, no whispers about money. Grace was my insurance, my silent heir. But of course, Michael and Emily didn't know that. All they saw was a frail old man sitting on billions of dollars, taking too long to die. So they plotted. And that brings us back to the yacht. Emily pushing me overboard wasn't some crime of passion. It was the finale of a long, careful plan. They'd already prepared fake tears for the police. A story about me slipping, maybe too much champagne. They'd cry on television, attend the funeral, and within weeks, they'd demand control of my estate. What they didn't know was that I'd anticipated this day for years. That's why when they returned home, giddy with greed, they didn't find a corpse waiting to be buried. They found me, alive, sitting in my leather chair, sipping whiskey, with the one special gift they never expected, a locked briefcase. Inside it, the true will. When Michael and Emily walked into the living room that night, their laughter died the moment their eyes landed on me. I'll never forget it. The way Michael froze in the doorway, his hand still gripping the key, his face draining of color like he'd seen a ghost. Emily, on the other hand, didn't falter. Her smile wavered for half a second, but then she slipped back into her perfect performance mask. "Dad!" she exclaimed, rushing toward me. "Oh my God, you're okay. We thought—" "Thought what?" I asked, swirling the whiskey in my glass. "That I drowned?" Michael swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. He tried to laugh, but it came out strained. "Dad, what are you talking about? You fell. We were just about to call the Coast Guard." "Is that so?" I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence stretch. The weight of it pressed down on them harder than any accusation. Emily sat beside me, her hand brushing mine like I was fragile glass. "You must have been so scared. We were terrified. We thought we lost you." I turned my head slowly until my eyes locked on hers. "Funny," I said, my voice low. "When I looked up from the water, you didn't look terrified. You looked relieved." Her hand jerked back. Michael's jaw tightened. "Dad, stop. You're confused. You're old. The fall, the shock. It's messing with your memory." Old, confused. That's what they wanted to believe. That I was too frail, too senile, too weak to remember the shove, the smile, the champagne toast to my death. But they had underestimated me. I set the glass down on the table and reached for the black briefcase at my side. Its lock clicked as I placed it in front of them. Michael frowned. "What's that?" "My gift to you," I said. "You wanted my fortune, didn't you? Everything I built, every dollar I bled for. Go ahead. Open it." Emily's eyes glittered. For a moment, the mask slipped, and greed flashed raw and naked across her face. She leaned forward, fumbling with the lock. The case popped open. Inside was a single envelope, thick, heavy, sealed, with my family crest. Michael snatched it up, tearing it open. His eyes darted across the words, and then widened. "What is this?" he hissed. Emily grabbed the paper, scanning it quickly, her face twisted. A trust. For Grace? Are you serious?" I smiled, slow and deliberate. "Not just a trust. Everything. The companies, the real estate, the stocks, the entire Caldwell empire now belongs to Grace, legally, irrevocably." Michael's voice cracked. You can't do this. I'm your son." "Yes," I said, softly. My son, who stood and watched as his wife tried to kill me. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily's face hardened, her sweet daughter-in-law act dissolving like sugar in water. "You think this will stop us?" she spat. "You think a piece of paper will keep us from what's ours?"
"Yours." I chuckled, shaking my head. "Emily, you married into this family. You contributed nothing. And Michael," I turned to him, my disappointment sharper than any blade. "You had every chance. I gave you the keys, but you never wanted to build. You just wanted to take." Michael stepped forward, his fists clenched. "You're making a mistake, Dad. You can't just cut me out. I'll fight this. I'll contest it." I leaned in, my voice dropping to a whisper. "Then you'll have to explain to a judge why your fingerprints are on the yacht's railing and why the Coast Guard found a hidden security camera I installed last month." Their faces went pale. Emily stammered, You had cameras?" "Oh, yes," I said, savoring the moment. High definition. Every smile, every whisper, every shove. For the first time, Emily broke. She stood there, shaking, her mask shattered. Michael looked at me like he didn't recognize me. Like the father he thought was weak and fading had suddenly risen from a grave with fire in his eyes. "You wanted me dead," I said, standing slowly, my voice steady. "But I'm still here. And now it's your turn to be afraid." Michael's face contorted with rage, the veins in his neck bulging. "You think you can destroy your own son like this? Do you know what people will say when they find out you disinherited me?" I smirked. "Oh, they'll say plenty. They'll talk about the greedy son who couldn't wait for his father to die. The son who stood by while his wife tried to push him into the ocean. And you know what, Michael? They'll believe it because I have the evidence." Emily's eyes darted around the room like a trapped animal. "Evidence? No one will believe some blurry video on a boat. We'll say it's fake. Deep fakes are everywhere these days." "Oh, but that's not all I have," I said calmly. "Do you think I'd survive 82 years in business by relying on just one card to play?" I pressed a button on the remote, resting beside my whiskey glass. The TV on the wall flickered to life. And there we were, footage from a yacht, crystal clear. Emily leaning close to me, whispering those words. Goodbye, old man. The shove. The way I tumbled over the railing, arms flailing. The way Michael just stood there, smiling. Emily gasped, stumbling backward as her face drained of blood. Michael lunged at the remote. "Turn it off. Turn it off." I held it just out of reach. "Sit down, Michael. This is only the beginning." They sat, but their anger filled the room like smoke. "You see," I continued, "I anticipated this long ago. I knew the two of you would come after my fortune. I may have looked frail, but I was never blind. Every dinner conversation, every fake smile, every whisper when you thought I wasn't listening. I cataloged it all, and I prepared. Emily sneered. Prepared how? By leaving everything to a college brat who doesn't know the first thing about running an empire. Gray says what you never did. I said, integrity, curiosity, compassion. She comes to see me because she loves me, not because she wants to count my money. That's why she'll succeed where you failed. Michael slammed his fist on the table, making the glasses rattle. You can't do this to me, Dad. I am your blood. That girl means nothing compared to me. I stood, my voice rising for the first time. You are my blood, Michael. And that's what breaks me most. You could have had everything. Not because of a will, not because of inheritance, but because you were my son. I would have trusted you to run it all, but you chose greed over loyalty. You chose her. I jabbed a finger toward Emily. Emily's face twisted into fury. Don't blame me for this. You were always impossible to please, Richard. You raised Michael in your shadow, made him feel worthless. No wonder he wanted what you wouldn't give. Michael flinched at her words, but he didn't deny them. And that was when I knew. My revenge had already started working. They were turning on each other. I let the silence hang for a beat before speaking again. Tomorrow morning, I'll be meeting with my attorneys. I'll be delivering this footage and the documents. The two of you won't inherit a dime. In fact, I paused, watching their faces lean in with dread. You'll be investigated for attempted murder. And when the trial comes, the world will see you for what you really are. Michael shot to his feet, pointing a trembling finger at me. You wouldn't dare. I stared back coldly. Try me. Emily grabbed his arm. Michael, stop. No, Emily, he shouted, his voice cracked with desperation. I'm not going to let this old man ruin us. If he thinks he can just walk away and destroy my life. But he stopped when he saw me smiling. That smile unnerved him more than any threat, because he knew deep down that I wasn't bluffing. They left that night without another word, but I knew it wasn't over. Emily would scheme. Michael would fume. They'd try to find cracks in my armor, holes in my plan. Maybe they'd try to discredit me publicly, maybe even come at me again, but I'd been underestimated once. Never again. As their car pulled out of the driveway, I poured myself another glass of whiskey and let the silence of the mansion settle around me. Tomorrow, the world would know, and my so-called family would learn that betrayal comes at a cost. The next morning, I woke before dawn. Years of running an empire had trained me to rise early, even if my body ached and my knees protested. But today wasn't business as usual. Today was war. I dressed in my best Navy suit, the one I used to wear to board meetings when I wanted people to know I meant business. I poured myself a strong coffee, then dialed a number I had been saving for months. Detective Harris, a gravelly voice answered. It's Caldwell, I said. I have something you want to see. By 9 a.m., my living room had transformed into a battleground. My attorney, Mr. Franklin, sat at my side, his briefcase overflowing with documents. Across from us, Detective Harris watched the yacht footage on the television, his brows furrowed. When Emily's voice whispered goodbye, old man and chubby overboard, Harris's lips pressed into a thin line. Crystal clear, he muttered. And you say this was just last night? I nodded. Had it not been for sheer luck and a strong will to live, you'd be investigating my death today. Franklin slid a folder across the table. And here are the estate documents. Mr. Caldwell has legally transferred his assets into an irrevocable trust. Michael and Emily Caldwell are no longer beneficiaries. Harris glanced at the paperwork, then back at me. You understand what this means, sir. If we move forward, this becomes public. Attempted murder charges against your own family. It won't be quiet. I leaned forward. Detective, I didn't build my life's work to be handed to snakes. Let it be public. Let the world see them for what they are. By noon, the police were at Michael's house. I imagined the scene as they knocked on the door. Emily opened it with that fake smile, only to have it shatter when Harris read her the charges. Michael's face turning red, his fists clenching, shouting that it was all a mistake. But this time his words meant nothing, because the cameras had spoken louder than any denial. That evening the news broke. Billionaire heir and wife arrested for attempted murder. The headlines blared. Photos of Michael and Emily being let out in handcuffs plastered every screen. Commentators speculated about greed, betrayal, and the ugly underbelly of wealth. I sat back in my chair, sipping tea instead of whiskey this time. For once, I felt no ache in my knees, no heaviness in my chest. Just peace. But my revenge wasn't complete yet. 2 days later, I called a press conference. Reporters packed into the marble lobby of Caldwell Enterprises. Cameras flashing. Grace stood beside me, nervous but resolute. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, my voice steady despite my age. You've seen the headlines. You've heard the rumors. But today, I want to speak the truth. The crowd hushed. My son and his wife attempted to end my life. Not because they love me, not because they care for me, but because they wanted my money. They believed that by removing me, they would inherit an empire. Gasps rippled through the room. Grace squeezed my hand. But what they didn't know, I continued, is that this empire has already been secured. Effective immediately, my granddaughter, Grace Caldwell, is the legal heir and steward of everything I built. She represents the future, one rooted not in greed, but in compassion and vision. Grace stepped forward, speaking shyly at first, then stronger. I will honor my grandfather's legacy, not by hoarding wealth, but by using it to create opportunities for education, for clean energy, for families in need. That's the Caldwell future. The room erupted in applause. Reporters shouted questions. Grace answered with a poise that made me swell with pride. And in that moment, I knew my revenge wasn't just about punishment. It was about restoration. Michael and Emily, meanwhile, were left to rot in the system. They hired lawyers, of course, claiming the video was staged, that I was senile, that it was all a misunderstanding. But the evidence was overwhelming. Their champagne glasses, their fingerprints on the railing. Emily's whisper caught crystal clear on tape. The trial dragged for months. I attended every session, cane in hand, watching them squirm in the defendant's chair. When the verdict came, guilty on all counts, I didn't celebrate. I simply nodded. Justice had spoken. That night, Grace and I sat on the balcony of the estate, looking out at the city skyline. "Grandpa," she said softly, "do you ever regret it? Exposing them like that? They're still family." I sighed. Family isn't defined by blood, Grace. It's defined by loyalty, by love, by how you treat one another. Michael stopped being my son the moment he stood on that deck and smiled while I drowned. She rested her head on my shoulder. "Then I promise I'll never let you down." I smiled. "You already haven't." The house is quiet now. Too quiet. Sometimes. I sit here in my study, surrounded by shelves of leather-bound books and photographs of a life well lived. Pictures of my late wife, of Michael as a boy, of Grace as a little girl smiling with ice cream dripping down her chin. Sometimes I stare at those old photos and ask myself, was I too hard on Michael? Did I push him into Emily's arms? Did I create the very greed that destroyed him? And maybe I did. Maybe by building an empire so vast, I unknowingly built a prison for my own son. One where the only escape he saw was through inheritance. But then I remember the moment. That single, devastating moment. The water closing over me. The burning in my lungs. The helplessness. And above me, my son standing there. Not moving. Not helping. Just smiling. That wasn't about me being a hard father. That wasn't about mistakes or misunderstandings. That was betrayal. Plain and simple. I share this story not because I want pity. Believe me, I don't. I share it because maybe some of you watching right now are in the same position. Maybe you've trusted people, family, friends, even your own children, who only see you as a wallet, not as a person. Maybe you felt that sting of betrayal, too. If that's you, then listen carefully. You are not crazy for protecting yourself. You are not cruel for drawing boundaries. And you are not selfish for cutting out people who would rather see you dead than see you happy. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes family is the granddaughter who sits with you when you're lonely, the neighbor who brings you soup when you're sick, the friend who checks in on you without asking for anything in return. Blood may bind us, but love defines us. Now, as for Michael and Emily, they'll serve their time. Maybe they'll spend years behind bars thinking about what they did. Maybe they'll blame me forever. That's their burden, not mine. I've made peace with my decision. And here's the ironic part. In the end, they didn't just lose my fortune. They lost the one thing money can't buy. My love, my trust, my forgiveness. That's a debt they'll carry longer than any prison sentence. So, to you listening, I have to ask, am I the holy for doing this? For cutting my son out completely? For making sure his betrayal didn't go unpunished? Asterisk, asterisk. Some people might say yes, that I should have forgiven him, that I should have remembered he's still my child. But I can't, and I won't, because if I forgave that, what lesson would I leave behind for Grace? For anyone, that money matters more than life? That betrayal can be excused if it comes with a familiar face? No, the lesson I want to leave behind is this. Never let greed go unchecked. Never let betrayal go unanswered. And never, ever confuse blood with love. Grace is the future now. She has the empire, the legacy, the chance to do better than all of us. I trust her with it, because she's already proven she values people more than profit. As for me, I'll live out my days quietly, reading my books, sipping my whiskey, maybe even smiling at the irony of it all. I survived the ocean. I survived betrayal. And in the end, I came out stronger. So what do you think, dear listener? Was I too harsh? Or did Michael and Emily deserve exactly what they got? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story made you think about family, about trust, about what really matters in life, then don't forget to hit that like button. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more. Because if my story teaches anything, it's that even in betrayal, there's a lesson. And sometimes that lesson is worth more than $3 billion.